We've all had moments where someone made us question our own memory, feelings, or even sanity. But when this happens repeatedly, it's not just a misunderstanding. It's gaslighting. And if you've ever been stuck in this cycle, you know how draining and confusing it can be. Today, let's break down how to recognize gaslighting and handle it without losing yourself. Gaslighting is one of those terms that people hear often, but few actually pause to understand deeply. At its core, gaslighting is emotional manipulation designed to make you question your own reality. It doesn't come at you all at once, like a loud accusation or an obvious lie. Instead, it sneaks in quietly through small, consistent remarks that cause you to second guess what you know to be true. Think about a time when you remembered an event clearly, but someone looked you straight in the eye and said, "That never happened." Maybe you brushed it off the first time. Maybe you thought, well, maybe I did misremember. But the second time, the third time, the 10th time, it starts to chip away at your confidence in your own memory. That's the seed of gaslighting. It thrives in repetition and subtlety. What makes gaslighting so dangerous is not just the denial of facts, but the impact it has on your perception of yourself. It creates a split between what you feel and what you're told you should feel. For example, you might be upset about something hurtful, but when you bring it up, you're told you're too sensitive or overreacting. Over time, that disconnect can make you ignore your own emotions just to maintain peace in the relationship. And that's exactly what the gaslighter wants, to replace your confidence with doubt and to make you more reliant on their version of reality than your own. It's also not always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's disguised as concern or even humor. A joke at your expense that cuts a little too deep, followed by, "Come on, I was just kidding. Don't take everything so seriously." Or a dismissive tone when you recall an event. "You're remembering it wrong. That's not how it happened at all." The delivery might seem casual, but the impact is heavy. You begin to wonder if maybe they're right, if maybe you really are overthinking or misremembering. And once that doubt is planted, the cycle becomes easier for them to repeat. Gaslighting, in its simplest form, is someone trying to control the narrative of your life. By bending reality to fit their story, they take away your ability to trust yourself. It's not always about the lie itself, it's about the erosion of your certainty. When you can't rely on your own memory, your own feelings, or your own instincts, you start looking to them for truth. And that dependency is exactly where they want you. Red flags of gaslighting are not always easy to spot in the beginning because they often appear disguised as normal disagreements or casual remarks. But when you pay closer attention, patterns start to emerge that reveal the real intention behind them. One of the biggest signs is constant denial. You could be recalling a clear situation, something you know without a doubt happened, and the other person will firmly reject it. They'll say things like, "That never happened," or "You're imagining things." The more often they repeat this, the more confused you become, because deep down you remember it, but the force of their denial makes you question your memory. Over time, this leaves you feeling stuck between what you know and what they insist. Another red flag is blame shifting. Whenever there's a disagreement, the focus somehow always turns back on you. If they snapped or lashed out, it's because you provoked them. If they lied, it's because you misunderstood. If they hurt your feelings, suddenly it's your fault for being too emotional. Notice how this removes any accountability from them while placing all the weight of responsibility on your shoulders. In a healthy relationship, both people are willing to acknowledge when they've done something wrong. In gaslighting, accountability is avoided at all costs, and you're left carrying the guilt for situations you didn't create. A subtle but powerful red flag is the constant use of phrases meant to minimize your experience. Words like "you're overreacting" or "you're too sensitive" become a recurring theme. These statements don't just dismiss your feelings in the moment, they make you doubt the validity of your emotions altogether. Instead of trusting your natural reactions, you start suppressing them, fearing you'll be told again that you're exaggerating. This makes it easier for them to continue their behavior without being challenged. Gaslighters often use contradictions to keep you unsteady. They might say one thing today and the complete opposite tomorrow, and when you point out the inconsistency, they'll act like you misunderstood or twist their words so that the contradiction looks like your mistake. This creates a constant state of confusion where you can't find solid ground to stand on. The more confused you are, the easier it is for them to guide the narrative in their favor. Another warning sign is the way they gradually isolate your voice. They make you feel like you can't trust your judgment, so you begin to silence yourself before they even have to. You hesitate to speak up, you second-guess your thoughts, and slowly, their version of reality becomes the only one in the room. The impact of gaslighting on a person is often invisible at first, but it grows quietly until it feels overwhelming. One of the earliest effects is confusion. You begin to question not only specific events, but also your ability to remember and interpret situations correctly. That confusion spreads into your daily life, where even small decisions feel heavy because you're no longer sure if you can trust your own judgment. It's not just about the arguments or the moments of manipulation. It's about the ripple effect that follows you long after the conversation is over. You replay the interaction in your head, wondering if you missed something, wondering if you were wrong, and that mental loop drains your energy. With time, confusion evolves into self-doubt. Gaslighting chips away at your confidence little by little until you start second-guessing even the things you once knew for sure. A person who used to feel strong and clear-minded suddenly feels hesitant and unsure. You begin to apologize excessively, not because you're at fault, but because it feels safer than standing your ground. The repeated dismissal of your feelings makes you wonder if your emotions are valid at all, and eventually, you may start ignoring them altogether just to avoid conflict. As self-doubt grows, your sense of identity takes a hit. You may notice that you don't recognize yourself as easily anymore. The things you used to value, the opinions you used to hold, even the confidence you once carried, it all feels muted under the weight of constant manipulation. Your self-image becomes blurry, shaped more by how they describe you than how you know yourself. If they call you forgetful, sensitive, dramatic, or difficult often enough, those words begin to stick, and you start seeing yourself through their distorted lens. This erosion of identity naturally leads to a loss of confidence. You don't trust your memory, you don't trust your feelings, and eventually, you don't trust your ability to make choices for yourself. Decisions that once felt simple become overwhelming because you're scared of being told you're wrong again. That lack of confidence doesn't stay in the relationship alone. It bleeds into work, friendships, and other areas of life. You might withdraw socially, avoid opportunities, or stay quiet in places you once felt comfortable speaking up, all because the weight of being constantly invalidated has left you unsure of where you stand. Trusting your gut is one of the most powerful tools you have when dealing with gaslighting, because gaslighting works by trying to silence that inner voice. Your instincts often notice the small inconsistencies before your mind can fully process them. You may not be able to explain it with perfect logic at first, but you feel something is off. Maybe the words don't match the tone, maybe the story doesn't line up, or maybe the way they dismiss you leaves a knot in your stomach. That feeling is your body's way of signaling that something isn't right, even if you can't prove it in the moment. The danger is that gaslighting tries to convince you to ignore those signals, to put more faith in their version of events than your own inner sense of truth. When you start believing that your gut feelings are unreliable, you give up one of the most natural defenses you have. That's why manipulators often target it directly, telling you that you're being paranoid, dramatic, or unreasonable. They want you to silence that discomfort and replace it with their narrative. But the more you practice listening to your gut, the stronger it becomes. For example, if every conversation leaves you feeling drained, anxious, or small, those emotions aren't random. They're evidence that something deeper is happening. Feelings are not flaws, they're signals, and ignoring them only creates more room for manipulation to grow. Trusting your gut doesn't mean you have to confront the person every time you feel uneasy. It simply means you honor that feeling is valid and worth paying attention to. You might take a step back, observe patterns, or confide in someone you trust to see if your instincts line up with reality. Often, the more you step outside the bubble of gaslighting, the clearer your perspective becomes. People close to you may confirm what your gut has been telling you all along, and that confirmation can be the reassurance you need to keep trusting yourself. The more you rely on your gut, the less control gaslighting has over you. Because while facts can be twisted and memories can be denied, that deep sense of discomfort is much harder to erase. It's a built-in compass designed to protect you, and when you learn to lean on it, you create a line of defense that no amount of manipulation can fully take away. Seeking clarity is one of the most effective ways to push back against the fog that gaslighting creates, because gaslighting thrives in confusion and vagueness. When someone constantly shifts stories, changes details, or denies things outright, it leaves you spinning, unsure of what's true and what isn't. That's exactly the point, to make you so lost in the back and forth that you eventually give up and accept their version of events. But when you start asking direct, specific questions, you cut through that haze and bring the focus back to facts. Questions like, when exactly did I say that? Or, can you explain what you mean by that? Force the other person to move away from general dismissals and provide something concrete. The act of seeking clarity also helps you steady yourself. Instead of reacting emotionally to the manipulation, you turn the interaction into something more grounded. When someone tells you, you're just overreacting, instead of defending yourself with more emotion, you can ask, what makes you think I'm overreacting? By doing this, you're not playing into the cycle where they dismiss you and you try harder to prove yourself. Instead, you shift the pressure back onto them to explain their words. That clarity may not always stop them from dodging or twisting, but it keeps you anchored in a calm, rational stance that's harder to destabilize. Clarity is also about refusing to let things stay vague. Gaslighters often rely on broad statements or contradictions to keep you second-guessing. They might say, you always do this, or you never listen, without giving any specific example. By asking, can you tell me when I did that, you expose the emptiness of those generalizations. Even if they avoid answering directly, you gain insight into the fact that their claims don't hold up under scrutiny. That knowledge helps you separate what's real from what's being projected onto you. Beyond questioning them, seeking clarity also means getting clear for yourself. Writing down what was said, reflecting on your own feelings, and grounding yourself in the facts of what actually happened gives you a stronger grip on reality. The clearer you are in your own mind, the less room there is for their confusion to take root. Gaslighting loses much of its power when you refuse to let conversations stay muddled and undefined, because the truth becomes harder to distort when it's laid out plainly and directly. Setting boundaries is one of the most important steps in handling gaslighting because it draws a line between what you will tolerate and what you refuse to accept. Gaslighting works by stretching your limits slowly, getting you used to being questioned, dismissed, or invalidated until it feels normal. Without clear boundaries, the manipulation has room to keep growing because the gaslighter knows they can push without consequence. Boundaries, on the other hand, act like guardrails. They keep you steady and remind both you and the other person that your reality is not up for debate. It might start with something simple, like telling yourself that if a conversation turns into constant denial or blame shifting, you will step away instead of staying stuck in circles. A strong boundary doesn't mean trying to convince the other person to change. It means changing how you respond. If someone insists on twisting your words, a boundary could be saying, "I'm not going to keep explaining myself if you refuse to listen," and then following through by ending the conversation. The power of boundaries lies in action, not just words. Gaslighters are skilled at ignoring what you say, but when your behavior shifts consistently, they're forced to notice the limits you've set. Boundaries protect your mental energy because they stop you from pouring it into endless arguments that only leave you feeling drained. Boundaries also give you back a sense of control. When you decide what behaviors you will or won't engage with, you stop waiting for the gaslighter's approval to feel validated. For example, if you set the boundary that your feelings are valid whether they acknowledge them or not, you take away some of their power to define your reality. It doesn't mean the gaslighting suddenly disappears, but it means you're no longer as vulnerable to it because you're standing firm on your side of the line. What makes boundaries challenging is the guilt that often comes with them. Gaslighters may accuse you of being cold, distant, or unreasonable when you enforce limits. That's because boundaries threaten their control. But the discomfort you feel when standing your ground is far less damaging than the erosion of self that comes from allowing manipulation to continue unchecked. Boundaries are a declaration to yourself that you matter, that your perspective matters, and that you will not keep giving endless access to someone who thrives on distorting your truth. Reinforcing your reality is a vital part of protecting yourself from gaslighting because the entire goal of manipulation is to make you doubt what you know to be true. When someone constantly twists your words, denies what happened, or insists that your feelings are wrong, it creates cracks in your sense of certainty. Over time, those cracks widen until you begin to wonder if you can trust yourself at all. That's why it becomes so important to anchor your reality in ways that can't be easily shaken. One simple but powerful method is keeping notes of conversations, events, or situations that left you questioning yourself. Writing things down in detail, what was said, how it made you feel, and when it happened, gives you something concrete to look back on. Later, when the gaslighter tries to rewrite history, you have your own record to ground you in the truth you experienced. Another way to reinforce your reality is by leaning on trusted voices outside the relationship. Sharing your experiences with friends, family, or a counselor can provide validation that what you're noticing is real. Gaslighting isolates you by making you feel like you're the problem, but hearing someone else say, "Yes, that sounds manipulative," or "I can see why you feel that way," helps break that isolation. These outside perspectives act like mirrors, reflecting back a clear image of reality when yours has been blurred. It's not about needing others to tell you what's true, but about reminding yourself that your experiences are valid and shared by more than just you. Grounding practices also help solidify your sense of reality. That might mean journaling your emotions regularly, practicing mindfulness to stay connected to how your body feels in certain situations, or reflecting quietly on what aligns with your values and what doesn't. Gaslighting thrives on making you feel unsteady, so anything that strengthens your connection to your inner world becomes a shield against that distortion. The more you return to your own center, the harder it is for someone else to convince you that your instincts and feelings don't matter. Reinforcing your reality also means being selective with what you accept from others. Just because someone insists on their version of events doesn't mean you have to absorb it as truth. You can acknowledge what they're saying without internalizing it. That separation between what's theirs and what's yours creates a mental boundary that preserves your sense of clarity even in the middle of manipulation. Taking action against gaslighting is often the hardest step because it requires moving from awareness into choice, and choice can feel heavy when your confidence has already been worn down. But action is where the real shift happens. Once you recognize the manipulation and start trusting your instincts, the next stage is deciding how you will respond. Sometimes this means limiting exposure, creating distance in conversations, or even refusing to engage when the same patterns repeat. Walking away mid-argument or choosing not to defend yourself for the 100th time is a form of action that sends a clear message. You will no longer invest your energy in a cycle designed to confuse you. Action can also look like detaching emotionally. This doesn't mean you stop caring or suddenly shut down your feelings, but it does mean you stop giving the gaslighter the satisfaction of controlling how you react. If their tactic is to provoke guilt, anger, or self-doubt, emotional detachment removes the fuel. Instead of trying to prove your reality to them, you conserve that strength for yourself. Sometimes the most powerful action is silence, choosing not to respond to accusations or denials that serve no purpose except to weaken you further. In some cases, action involves making bigger decisions about the relationship itself. If boundaries continue to be violated, if patterns don't change, and if the toll on your mental health grows too heavy, the action may be to leave. Walking away from a gaslighter can feel terrifying because they've worked hard to make you question whether you can stand without them. But the very fact that you're considering it is proof that you've begun reclaiming your voice. Leaving isn't always immediate. It can mean gradually creating space, building a support system, and preparing yourself mentally and practically for what comes next. Every step you take in that direction is an action that reinforces your worth. Taking action is not about punishing the other person, but about protecting yourself. It's the process of shifting from a place of reaction, constantly defending, explaining, or doubting, to a place of choice. Each choice you make, no matter how small, pulls back the control that gaslighting tries to strip away. Whether it's stepping out of an argument, documenting the truth, setting stronger limits, or ultimately walking away, these actions are how you reclaim your ground and remind yourself that your reality belongs to you. Gaslighting is powerful because it doesn't attack you from the outside. It attacks you from the inside. It tries to convince you that your memory can't be trusted, your feelings don't matter, and your voice isn't worth hearing. But the truth is, you are not broken, and you are not imagining things. The fact that you feel the weight of this means your awareness is already working in your favor. Recognizing the signs, setting boundaries, reinforcing your reality, and taking action are not just steps for handling gaslighting. They're steps for reclaiming your confidence and your peace of mind. You don't have to fight to prove their version wrong. You only have to stand firm in what you know to be true. And when you do, the hold of manipulation starts to break, and your clarity becomes stronger than their confusion.